Just look what we have done. All that we destroyed, you must build again. When the children cry, let them know we tried. 'Cause when the children sing, then the new world begins. Little child, you must show the way to a better day for all the young. 'Cause you were born for the world to see that we all can live with love and peace. No more presidents, and all the wars will end. One united world under God. When the children cry, let them know we tried. 'Cause when the children sing, then the new world begins.
That was White Lion with When the Children Cry. Welcome back to another edition of the Awake and Aware radio show. This is your host, Infinite Consciousness, commonly known as Jason. Please visit Awake, Aware, and Part of the Solution on Facebook and check out Freedom from Compulsions at www.freedomfromcompulsions.vpweb.com. If you would like to access the archive of all of the past Awake and Aware radio shows, go to www.blogtalkradio.com/infinite consciousness. Last week, we discussed the massive control tool of money that enslaves the global population in debt. This week, we'll be discussing the epidemic of the state stealing of children from loving parents for both a profitable and elite agenda. I'm going to give a quick plug here for Freeman Simon Elder. He posted on the event page on Facebook. He would like to give a plug for this, and it looks like a very interesting site. It's Boycott the 2012 London Olympics to Stop Child Snatching by UK Corrupt Courts. And let me just see what that link is. It's actually looks like a group on Facebook. Again, that's Boycott 2012 London Olympics to Stop Child Snatching by the UK Corrupt Courts. All right, let's get back to the show here. I'm going to be taking calls at the end. I have a lot to go over as usual in such a short period of time, but the call-in number is 714-694-4160. Let's get started. An agenda stated long ago by the elite is to eventually terminate all parental rights of all people and have all children raised in government-ran dormitory-type settings. This is so they can condition and program these children in the way they see fit from birth with no complaints or anything to get in their way. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World gives us a glimpse of this, and keep in mind that he was a member of the Illuminati Fabian Society, whose symbol is a wolf in sheep's clothing. The programming and conditioning of our children is extreme right now, with them being sent off for the majority of the day to indoctrination centers called schools, and the programming through television and corporate media propaganda. Add to this that the created economic crisis has now forced both parents to work long hours where they do not even have the smallest amount of time to help guide their own children. Our children are currently being raised by the corrupt elite agenda without many of us even realizing it. Now, the state is using their tools of CPS and social services to steal children from loving parents to be placed in profit-driven foster homes or sometimes even end up in the hands of government-sponsored pedophile rings and or child sex slaves for the elite. And let us not forget about the Vatican, which is a huge tool of the Illuminati, has desperately covered up the countless child sex abuse cases in the Catholic churches globally. Also keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that with this agenda, there's a lot behind why these children are being stolen and why specific kinds of children, specifically blonde-haired, blue-eyed children, are being taken too. The American people are conditioned to trust government agencies of all types, regardless of what practices and lack of oversight might be involved. Society is not encouraged to be the watchdogs over state meddling in the people's affairs, which they should really be. Of all the blindly trusted government action in their lives, which people are least likely to question, Child Protective Services probably tops the list. The name of the agency itself strikes right to the heart of a serious reactionary trigger in people's minds. The safety of children is a normal adult human concern. Protecting helpless children from all forms of abuse is a natural and good instinct which, in spite of the depravity of the world, still burns strong in most humanity. Unfortunately, it is also a target of the enemy to twist and pervert to their advantage, removing what is a matter of common sense defense of children in exchange for the nonsensical notion that the state and not the parents are what is best for them. Little known to most Americans, Child Protective Services is not in the business of being the nonprofit benefactors of abused children. They do indeed collect profits from each child which is taken from their family. The state receives federal bounty payments on each child adopted out through CPS. What this agency truly constitutes is a legal kidnapping ring, if legalities are to be defined by whatever the government can get away with. We cannot even take solace in assuming that those children adopted out go to good families. The CPS has, on numerous occasions, been directly linked with handing over illegally obtained children to international child sex slavery operations. Those that end up in foster care are very often forced onto regimens of psychiatric medication, which will irreversibly impair their brain development, all without the consent of biological parents who, in many cases, have done nothing whatsoever to justify the kidnapping of their kids. It should come as no surprise that the controllers of the nation and the world's affairs have an agenda to take apart the family unit entirely. As long as the family unit survives, the parents remain the primary educators of their children. This in turn means that those ideals, which are passed down over generations, which would oppose the ideologies of a globalist agenda, can persist. The only true way to convert a population entirely to a new world order of thinking is to begin at the cradle, programming young minds to perceive that the state as the parental figure of consequence. All teaching must come from the state. The ideologies which are held by the elite must be those which are instilled at the most formative moments of a child's life. Likewise, parents must be taught that their authority over their own children is second to that of the state, and that it is not a biological right but simply a privilege, much like a driver's license. One has only to look at what constitutes a reason to tear someone's child away from them to really begin to see what is supposed benevolent. Let me start that over again. One has only to look at what constitutes a reason to tear someone's child away from them to really begin to see what this supposed benevolent agency is about. Amongst the thousands and thousands of cases anyone can easily pull up of bereft parents who have their children stolen from them under extremely questionable circumstances comes the recent and most disturbing tale of John Irish and his fiancée Stephanie Taylor. John Irish is a member or affiliated with what is known as the Oath Keepers. The Oath Keepers are an association of firemen, police officers, and military personnel dedicated to upholding civilian rights afforded under the Constitution and refuse to uphold orders from their superiors which violate those rights. They are nonviolent, nonpartisan, and wholly legal in the most fundamental way according what stated in the Constitution. Oath Keepers, quote, is a nonpartisan association of currently serving military, reserves, National Guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore with the support of the like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to help us God. Our oath is to the Constitution. Our motto is not on our watch, end quote. And you can go to oathkeepers.org/oath. Thursday night, shortly after the birth of their new baby girl, Cheyenne, John Irish and Stephanie Taylor lost their parental rights and their child was stolen. New Hampshire Division of Family Child Services, along with police, enlisted hospital staff to take the child, telling her parents it was in order for a pediatrician to perform a routine exam. After taking the child, police emerged and demanded Irish allow them to search him, which they did even after his refusal. Finding nothing more than a lighter and a pocket knife, an affidavit was produced stating Irish's involvement with Oath Keepers as the primary reason for taking the child amongst an array of secondary charges which Irish states are entirely erroneous. One of these secondary charges cited was his refusal to attend anger management courses, a charge which does not remotely constitute a cause for seizing one's child. According to the affidavit, John Irish was a member of a, quote, militia called the Oath Keepers, end quote. The Oath Keepers are not, in fact, a militia at all. A militia, by definition, would be comprised of civilians who have trained and are able to operate as a state-specific defense force. Many of the Oath Keepers are not civilian, but in the employment of the U.S. military itself. And the association is not a unified martial defense team, but simply a collection of police, firefighters, military, etc., who have sworn to uphold the very oath which was required of them to take in their employment. What is clearly the case here is that a visible line has been drawn in the sand by the PTB, meaning powers that be. A statement on free speech has been loudly broadcast, and its intent is to hit the most sensitive nerve of any normal human being, their children. The controllers want all the people to know that speaking your mind, standing up against a dictatorial government, and demanding your basic human rights be left intact will cost you, and cost you dearly. You have been warned. You can either stand up for what's right or you can keep your kids, but the two will not be compatible. The enemy knows just how dearly beloved children are to their parents, that a mother or a father has a deep primal instinct to protect and even die for their kids. They know that just as if the American people were prisoners of war, they are much more likely to bow before their captors if their captors threaten their children than if they torture the prisoners themselves. John Irish's story has made a lot of noise, and that's a good thing. If the public is aware and outraged, they certainly should be. His is not the first story of its kind to have taken place, though. Irish's position has been the position of many families before him who have stood up against tyranny. We can only hope that his is the one which will be the voice of the many. In Williamson County, Austin, last April, the scene was not so different. Barry and Candy Cooper were drug reform activists and filmmakers who had a happy 7-year-old son. They fell under investigation from CPS due to rumors that they were, quote, teaching their son to distrust the government, end quote. If you tell me, I mean, it's kind of hard to trust a government that's really a corporation owned and dictated by the Rothschild Zionists. But that's a whole different story. One night, their home was raided and searched by police officers claiming that they had heard Barry's voice in the background of a false police report. After discovering an amount of marijuana, which equated to a small misdemeanor charge, they were both arrested. Some days later, while their son was visiting family in East Texas, CPS contacted the Coopers, threatening felony endangerment charges. The filed grievances against their parents were officially being unsuitable parents due to teaching their children to distrust the government, and aggressiveness towards authorities because they demanded a court order prior to CPS entering their home. Take a good look at the country you live in, especially if you are a parent of a minor child who or might become one. Quote, as long as the government is perceived as working for the benefit of the children, the people will happily endure almost any curtailment of liberty and almost any deprivation. End quote. Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler. All right, quote, behind the money is a socialist ideology that children should be raised by the state. This agenda was promoted by Dr. C. Henry Kemp, author of the Battered Child Syndrome in the 1970s. An open supporter of the Communist Party stated, quote, we must remove children from the crude influence of their families and, frankly, nationalize them, end quote. Dr. Kemp emphasized the need for a stealthy, incremental approach to implementing the agenda to make families obsolete. Federal statistics say that there are approximately 3 million reports of suspected child abuse and neglect each year. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services documents 900,000 as, quote, substantiated, end quote, leaving over 2 million families per year falsely accused. Of the substantiated cases, 68% do not involve child maltreatment, according to the federal authorities. This figure is escalating at an alarming rate each year as overzealous reporting and frivolous intervention by CPS spins out of control. Under the CPS microscope, every word, inflection, and action is attributed with the most bizarre and outlandish meanings. If you have ever bounced a check, you have a criminal record. If your child is shy, they are fearful and withdrawn. If they are outgoing and active, they are acting out due to the trauma. Federal law gives CPS 15 months to seek termination of parental rights and have the child adopted out and collect hefty adoption incentive bonuses. Did we mention the money? So children are being put up for adoption based on the timeline, even when parents have not had a chance to answer the initial allegations. And in the absence of any evidence or charges that they have harmed their child, social workers routinely perjure themselves, under oath without even facing any penalties or admonishment. This is a huge growth industry that provides private profit through Medicaid. Service providers, vendors, hold multi-million-dollar contracts with the social services agencies. Families are ordered to engage in services with the contracted vendors, all of whom bill Medicaid at inflated rates for services that are often inappropriate, unnecessary, onerous, and completely irrelevant, not to mention unconstitutional, to the family situation or to child maltreatment. It is socialist ideology that children should be raised by the state. Dr. C. Henry Kemp, author of The Battered Child Syndrome and an open supporter of the Communist Party, stated, quote, "We must remove children from the crude influence of their families and frankly nationalize them," end quote. All right. Quote, "My name is Black Michael, and I granted Way of Canada and Australia and the world my exclusive story as a retired headhunter who is trying to make amends for the over 25,000 children removed over a 22-year period." This is right from an ex-worker, ladies and gentlemen. CPS and other agencies paid me to falsify, this is him speaking, paid me to falsify information to make these children wards of the court. As I said last week, my job was to locate families on welfare, low income, low IQ, or the least likely to be able to afford counsel that could get them their children returned in their custody. I was paid $1,800 per child I brought into care, with a $500 bonus if a child was in some way handicapped and a $10,000 bonus if a child was adopted out without parental consent. I am not proud of what I did, and I am now trying to see that as many children as I can will be returned to their loving families. This is why I am stepping forward to give testimony to what we headhunters do. First, we located a family that fit the criteria, then watched that family for a circumstance that really happened, that was not really dangerous, but which likely made it look likely abuse, neglect, or some other endangerment was going on. We then made written sworn statements to the agencies we worked for, and a warrant would then be issued for the child or children in the family to be removed from the family home. With the economy as it is and the expected depression through by 2012, CPS and like organizations, this is not him anymore, there was an end quote, CPS and like organizations are doubting their quotas to stay in business and have no doubt for them that this business is slowly monetary and has nothing to do with the safety of children in legitimate terms. More children die in the hands of their foster parents than in the hands of their true parents, for which I know I am responsible for the loss of life to these 11 of these children by falsifying records and statements. That's from the same writer, the ex-CPS worker. As headhunters, this is him too, we took a full week-long course on how to spot vulnerable families, how to falsify allegations, how to testify to CPS benefit. This course also taught us that when children were taken into care, the immediate program of separation of child from family would begin. The child would be rewarded from compliance and punished for defiance. A type of mind control would be used by foster parents, even though these foster parents did not know they were being taught these skills during their training of 2 weeks. Foster parents only have criminal checks. They are not interviewed by psychologists or trained personnel. They merely have to express their want to be foster parents and follow the instructions of care and reward and punishment to keep the children in their care under their control. The foster parent school is to separate the child from his or her parents as widely as possible. The child, when the prearranged telephone call or visit has not produced, the child is told, "Your mother and father hate you. They don't want you. That is why they never showed up. We love you. We want you. You are safe with us as long as you follow our simple rules and expectations." Very quickly, most contact with birth parents and families is brought to very limited contact, end quote. Understand that for every individual who is intimidated into laying down and accepting the harassment of the state of their family affairs out of fear, there is that much more to fear in the future. Every incremental step the dictators succeed in taking is one step closer to a country where no one will have a secure right to protect their own children from a government who might see fit to kidnap them. As terrifying a statement as they have made in threatening to steal children due to political viewpoints, it is now time to lay down, it is not time, to lay down and accept it. Of course, you only have to look at the Southern Poverty Law Center's views of veterans, oath keepers, constitutionalists, and others to see how such people could be targeted by CPS. Then you have the Missouri Information Analysis Center, MIAC, report on homegrown terrorism, the Department of Justice's document entitled Investigating Terrorism and Criminal Extremism, Terms and Concepts, and the feds using pre-crime to target disgruntled veterans. The picture becomes even clearer that members of the various patriot groups are going to have their children targeted by the CPS. for forced adoption as a political weapon of terror. When tracing corruption, follow the money, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of money to be made off from illegal forced adoptions in the USA. This is not just an American issue. Similar cases are happening throughout the United Kingdom and the European Union, and not just for political reasons. There was a lot of money to be made out of selling nice, healthy children from good middle-class homes for illegal adoption. As the saying goes, if one wants to get to the heart of corruption, one only has to follow the money. 1. Foster parents make $400, this is in pounds, $400 to $800 per week per child. 2. Special children's homes, typically £7,000 per week per child. 3. Lawyers and courts cost, typically £500,000 per case. Experts, number 4, typically £28,000 for a simple report. 5. Adoption agencies make millions to £18,000 per placement. And 6. Local authorities get millions for hitting adoption targets. The above information is gleaned from what some have been able to gather through various Freedom of Information Act requests in the UK. We have worked out that each illegally adopted child is worth a share of approximately £563,000 sterling, even before you add in the bonuses to local authorities for hitting adoption targets. With over 4,500 children a year within the UK being adopted legally or illegally, that is an annual share of around, let's see here, £2,533,500,000 in just foster care fees, special children's homes, lawyers, courts, quote, experts, unquote, and adoption agencies. How lucrative corruption really is. Even senators are silenced. The late Senator Nancy Schaefer openly spoke out against this, and it cost her dearly. No official investigation has been held concerning the suspicious death of Senator Nancy Schaefer and her husband on the 26th of March, 2010. Children in care are more likely to be in harm's way. In the USA, child stealing by the state is just an epidemic and endemic as it is over in the United Kingdom. There are many sites dedicated to this scourge in the USA, more than I can link within this article I'm using here. But one article at WKBW.com stands out in particular. CPS commits unpunished crimes against innocent parents and children and destroy families for federal funds. We got physical abuse, 59 by parents, 160 by CPS. Sexual abuse, 13 by parents, 112 by CPS. Neglect, 241 by parents, 410 by CPS. Medical neglect, 12 by parents, 14 by CPS. And fatalities, 1.5 by parents, 6.4 by CPS. Fact, number of cases per 100,000 children in the United States. These numbers come from the National Center on Child Abuse and Neglect, NCCAN, in Washington. 1 in 4 children under state care will die. Why is Indiana the number 1 state for the deaths of children? Lack of accountability, responsibility, and oversight. Why do foster parents and institutions get by with abuse and murder? Lack of accountability, responsibility, and oversight. When there is a complaint against the Department of Children, CPS, who does the investigation? They do. As the fox watches over the henhouse, so does CPS cover up, shred up, lie, make false documentation, and conspire to obstruct justice of their own crimes. How the courts are used as a weapon. Then we have the case of Maureen Spalek in the UK. From the Daily Telegraph. Okay, this is the article from the Telegraph right here real quick. All right. Even more bizarre becomes the contradictions thrown up by the system that have evolved in the name of protecting children. I have more than one reported the case of Maureen Spalek, the loving mother forcibly separated from her 3 children who faces criminal charges for sending her 12-year-old son a birthday card, despite a judge's ruling allowing her to do so. Having already been arrested and imprisoned for 24 hours for this alleged offense, she was last week again in court to hear that she must return for a 3rd time on July 29th. Despite an earlier court agreeing that she was an excellent mother who had done her children no harm, social workers had taken them away for adoption, and she has several times been arrested for trying to make contact with them, even when she had done nothing of the kind. Failing that, FTAC and other methods of intimidation are useful. Of course, if legal, which should be illegal, proceedings fail, there are other means to get people to shut up about their stolen children. In the United Kingdom, we have such a thing as FTAC, which is the Fixated Treat Assessment Centers, that are to be used by the state as a weapon against dissent through the forced sectioning of people deemed by the enemies of the state or radical extremists. These can include members of TPUC, the Freeman Movement, the British Constitutional Group, or anyone else who is deemed to be a radical, even without evidence that they pose an actual risk. This includes those who have had their children taken from them illegally by the state and who won't just shut up about it. At the present, there is only one FTAC in central London, but there are plans to roll this out nationwide in every major city. Those who are put through an FTAC will be sectioned without the usual judicial oversight or protections afforded under the Mental Health Act. Naturally, those who become subject to attentions by FTAC, who have children, will have their children removed from them, even with no evidence of risk to those children. So patriots in the UK who are parents can be terrorized by both the social services and by the threat of being sent to a fixated threat assessment center and subsequently sectioned with no sound judicial oversight. Even without the use of the FTACs, people who have spoken out against legal forced adoptions or actual child abuse, where it involves figures high up in the establishment, have found themselves targeted by the Mental Health Act, as has happened in the case of Anne Grieg during her long fight to get justice for her Down syndrome daughter, Holly Grieg. If you're a Scottish sheriff, you can molest and rape little Down syndrome girls with impunity, and the law won't touch you at all. In fact, the law will do everything in its power to protect you and cover up your crimes, even to the point of sectioning the victim's mother under the Mental Health Act or murdering her brother. So who is Holly Grieg? Holly lived in Aberdeen, Scotland. Her family consisted of Anne, her mother, father, Dennis, and brother Greg. It was back in 2000 when Holly told her mom something very disturbing that any mother dreads to hear, that she had been repeatedly sexually abused by her father, Dennis Charles Mackey, and by her brother, Greg. This abuse stemmed back to when Holly was 6 years old. Holly also told her mom that her brother Greg had also been abused by his father. We hear such horror stories many times, especially when another member of the family is also abused, and that person then becomes part of the spider's web. As one would expect, Anne immediately reported the incident to the Grampian police in Aberdeen, and it was then that the thing started to get so terribly wrong. Over a period of time, Holly started to recall the names of those who had abused her, and eventually learned that her husband Dennis had offered his daughter to an extended ring of pedophiles. One can imagine the terrible abuse, psychological pain, and humiliation that Holly endured during this period, and the terrible pain that Mom also endured. It became a further shock when Anne learned that this ring of pedophiles included a serving police officer with the Grampian police named Terry Major and a very high-profile gentleman called Graham Buchanan, who happened to be the Aberdeen sheriff. After some in-depth investigations by medical staff and Grampian police, Holly's account was fully accepted as being authentic, but that's as far as the case went, and everything was very carefully swept under the carpet. I'm going to be going off live in about 90 seconds. You can go to the website itself to hear the rest of the show. The last 15 minutes of the show is always off air because it only gives me a half hour live, so please go to the website to hear the rest. One of the main players in this deplorable case was that of Elish Francis Angiolini, a Scottish lawyer who has served in the political role of the Lord Advocate in Scotland since 2006. Her bio reads that she was appointed post of Solicitor General for Scotland in November of 2001, becoming the first woman, the first procurator, fiscal, and the first solicitor to hold the post. This lady prevented any action being taken by the police, or should I say against the police and the sheriff, and consequently allowed the main offend, Dennis Charles Mackey, to escape the country and settle in Portugal. The story does not stop there because the authorities started a campaign to discredit and intimidate Anne by having her forcibly taken to a mental institution in the hope of taking Holly from her and handing her back to her evil father. Anne remained strong and managed to have herself checked over by a leading psychiatrist who then certified her as being perfectly sane. This brave woman stood up to these bullying tactics and consequently forced them to accept the findings of the psychiatrist. over the coming years, Anne remained strong and continued to fight this battle, which eventually led to Anne being able to convince the news of the world to take up her story in 2009. What was also disturbing was the fact that Holly had been receiving payments from the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority, which, as we all know, is a payment handed out for the victims of a crime. One must fully understand that for this payment to take place, one has to have been vetted by the authorities to qualify for such payments. Surely, this in itself are an expression of the guilt, even though to this day no investigations have been carried out. Holly's father, Dennis, and Greg went to live in Portugal, which also so happened to be the same country where Madeleine McCann went missing. Anne decided that she should alert the authorities and went to another police station in her newly acquired home in Shrewsbury. She was hopeful that the local police would listen to her story and that they would then notify their counterparts in Portugal that this pedophile had relocated there and may have some connection with Madeleine. It became evident that this possible vital information was not passed on by the British police. Private investigators into Holly's situation have since revealed the presence of other pedophile rings in Scotland, and it became clear that senior authorities figures in Scotland are prepared to obstruct the course of justice and allow the sexual abuse of such venerable members of our society to continue unchecked in order to save their own necks. This letter clearly shows the names of the offenders. As one would expect, this letter received little attention by the Scottish Court Services, and their response is copied here in the article that I'm reading at the moment. This letter was in actual fact a sort of name and shame letter, but didn't serve any purpose apart from the fact it serves as an acknowledgement by the Scottish Court Service. The letter was dated 24th of June 2009. Okay. It was extremely interesting to learn about what happened to journalist and broadcaster Robert Greene. He decided to investigate the Holly case and went up to Scotland only to find himself arrested by the Grampian police with heavy involvement for Scotland's Crown Office. Robert had traveled to Aberdeen to attend a public protest against the lack of action by Scotland's law enforcement agencies in bringing to justice identified individuals belonging an Aberdeen-based pedophile ring, names of which included members of Scottish legal establishment and the local sheriff. Robert was promptly arrested soon after his arrival and prior to his attendance to the planned protest. It was ironic that his appearance the next day was at the Aberdeen Sheriff Court, where he was taken before a colleague of the sheriff who was named as a key player in this pedophile ring. It should be pointed out at this stage regarding a police project that was in existence called Operation Oar that was set up to identify many pedophiles in public office, none of which have yet been prosecuted. What is alarming here is the fact that poor Holly claims she was abused for 14 years from the age of 6 and has given police the names of some of the men she says assaulted her. The 30-year-old and her mother, Anne, have been campaigning for criminal proceedings since 2000. All of the abuse took place in Aberdeen, and Holly and her mother claim to have made a statement at Bucksburn Police Station in July naming those involved. The family moved to Shropshire, and 2 Grampian police officers traveled to Shrewsbury in September last year to re-interview Holly at a special facility. Last month, the Crown Office revealed there was not enough reliable evidence to proceed with the case. A spokesman said at the time, historical allegations of sexual abuse made by a 30-year-old woman in Shropshire have been thoroughly investigated by police. Crown Counsel have considered all the available information and decided that there is insufficient credible, reliable, and admissible evidence to justify criminal proceedings in respect of those allegations. It must be fully understood that this statement was in actual fact false because no proper investigation has ever been carried out, as only Holly herself was interviewed. Despite no charges ever being brought, Holly received £13,500 compensation from the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority in April of last year. It is understood that a Grampian detective inspector described Holly as a, quote, a truthful witness to the best of her ability and an entirely innocent victim, end quote. Mrs. Grieg, 58, claims her daughter has experienced nightmares and panic attacks since she first told her about the alleged abuse. There is also one piece of the jigsaw puzzle that has not been covered, and that is regarding the death of Holly's uncle, Robert David Grieg, Anne's brother. Just when you think you have heard enough of this sordid case, it must include the circumstances leading to the death of her uncle. On the 17th of November, 1997, her uncle was found in a burnt-out car close to Aberdeen. The police believed it was a case of suicide, and the family attempted to obtain a copy of the autopsy. The authorities had for some time declared that no papers existed, and basically the case was officially closed. And with the support of others, repeatedly tried to obtain the autopsy report, which the authorities were reluctant to release, and it was only obtained on the 31st of December. Before we go into that autopsy, let me tell you an incident that took place prior to this tragic event. After the death of her uncle, Holly told her mom that one day her uncle had come into the house and caught her father having sex with her. Uncle Robert gave a very clear warning to her father never to do that again. Now we come to the autopsy result, which in my opinion gives a very clear-cut verdict of murder and not suicide. One could even possibly think that this could be called a political assassination, as Robert Grieg really did know too much, especially about people in high places. He was totally devoted to his sister Anne and dear Holly. The autopsy gave the verdict of death by smoke inhalation, but also noticed that Robert had severe damage to his skull, 2 broken ribs, and a broken sternum. In addition to this, his body also contained much alcohol, even though Robert was a non-drinker. And the autopsy found residue of whiskey in his stomach. A person apparently came across the car and attempted to save Robert, which came across as a sort of heroic story when in actual fact it is believed that this person was indeed the murderer. It is important for the world to understand that a very grave injustice has been carried out here, and that the Grampian police have acted in a way that does not benefit their duty or care for the people of Aberdeen, and more importantly, poor Holly, who, like many, have fallen victim to such a pedophile ring. Pedophilia is deeply rooted in our society and has, in the past, encompassed some extremely powerful people, including politicians, etc. The fact that a serving police officer was involved in a very senior figure in the legal system of Scotland cannot be taken lightly. The illegal adoption racket. A lot of illegal stolen children wind up on the government-sponsored websites on sale for adoption. The British Association for Adoption and Fostering is one such organization with a website putting children up for adoption like cattle. And this organization is known for putting up children who have been illegally removed from parents without any due process under law. But then the mafia family courts are deliberately rigged against the parents. Meanwhile, children who really do not or do need rescuing from abuse by the social services are just left to rot and die. Children like baby Peter, Victoria Crimby, Kira Ishak, and many, many others. This is because they are not nice middle-class children suitable for the illegal forced adoption trade. They don't smile sweetly in photographs, and their injuries and scars are quite often horrendous, to say the least. They're not exactly poster kids for the BAAF. Conspiracy of Silence. This was a documentary that came out in the 90s. Okay. Child sex abuse ring revealed in free Discovery Channel documentary. Conspiracy of Silence is a powerful, disturbing documentary revealing a U.S. child sex abuse and pedophilia ring that leads to the highest levels of government. Featuring intrepid investigator John DeCamp, a highly decorated Vietnam War veteran and 16-year Nebraska state senator, Conspiracy of Silence reveals how rogue elements at all levels of government have been involved in systematic child sex abuse and pedophilia to feed the base desires of key politicians. Keep in mind all of the pedophilia that was found on the many of the Pentagon workers' computers. All right. Based on DeCamp's riveting book, The Franklin Cover-Up, Conspiracy of Silence begins with the shutdown of Nebraska's Franklin Community Federal Credit Union after a raid by federal agencies in 1988 revealed that $40 million was missing. When the Nebraska legislator launched a probe into this affair, what initially looked like a financial swindle soon exploded into a startling tale of drugs, money laundering, and a nationwide child sex abuse ring. 19 months later, the Legislative Committee's chief investigator died suddenly and violently. A dozen others linked to the Franklin case investigation died strange and mysterious deaths. So why have you never heard of the Franklin cover-up? Originally scheduled to air in May of 1994 on the Discovery Channel, Conspiracy of Silence was yanked at the last minute due to formidable pressure applied by top politicians. Some very powerful people did not want you to watch this documentary. Thanks to the power of the Internet, you can now view the eye-opening documentary. Other links provide ideas on what you can do, detailed information about the case, reliable media coverage, and verifiable information on the mind control programs, which play a key role in the sex abuse scandals. Conspiracy of Silence, which is 55 minutes long, is now available for free viewing at this link, http://personalgrowthcourses.net/video/conspiracy of silence. They also ordered all copies to be destroyed, but I actually have a copy thanks to the Internet. I was able to download it and burn it by accident, of course. Okay. For an excellent website filled with information about the Franklin case is www.franklincase.org. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff on here, but let me move on with the information. Note that the official documents at the link immediately above, some of the links I provided, identify a group called the Finders based in Washington, D.C. An FBI and Customs investigation definitively linked the Finders to organized child sex abuse, child pornography, blood rituals, and much more. The investigation revealed vast amounts of documents implicating a massive lucrative child sex abuse ring that was international in scope. The paragraph below is a quote from a statement at the end of the final document showing how the investigation was stopped by the CIA. Quote, I was advised of circumstances which indicated that the investigation in the activity of the Finders had become a CIA internal matter. The MPD, Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, report has been classified secret and was not available for review. I was advised by the FBI had withdrawn from the investigation. The FBI Foreign Counterintelligence Division had directed MPD not to advise the FBI Washington field office of anything that had transpired. No further information will be available. No further action will be taken, end quote. Child stealing by the state is still a very real issue, and as both the United States and the United Kingdom fall further into tyranny, the snatching of children from good, loving families who just so happen to be patriots will not only continue, it will escalate. Quote, when the government fears the people, there is liberty. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny, end quote. Thomas Jefferson. Let's look at some resources here. These resources are here to anyone who is having a custody battle with CPS or SS. United Kingdom, forced-adoption.com, facet.co.uk, stopinjusticenow.com, solicitorsfromhell.com or .co.uk. PAROC.org.uk, unity-injustice.com, uktrackers.co.uk, parentsagainst.injustice.org.uk, and PAFAA.org.uk. We would also recommend getting in touch with the editorial staff of the UK column for advice, especially with regards to cases where parents want to fight publicly. There is a whole minefield in UK law with regards to the family courts of injustice, and these guys are good. Some of their forum members have expertise in such matters as well, but contacting the editorial staff is the first point to call in. All right, I do want to say, too, before I move on here, that the family courts, and let's just stick with family courts now. Family courts were originally eugenics courts, and they just changed their name and face under a different guise. All right, the United States, WERMENH.com/DCYF.html. This is a new one, NHDCYF.info/first_contact.html. Protecting our children from being sold.wordpress.com. FightCPS.com. and AACNCCLUB.com/all caps kidsforsale_DFACS.html. If anything, it is time for parents to rethink allowing their children to partake in the system altogether. Babies have been born for millennia outside of hospitals, and humanity still survives. Take the power out of the hands of the controllers and have your children at home. Don't register them. Don't send them to public schools. Don't take them for vaccinations. Parents, take your kids from the state before the state takes them from you. It's a long-planned agenda, ladies and gentlemen, to have the state terminate all parental rights of all parents and have the government raise them in dormitory-type settings. This was stated long ago, and the totalitarian tiptoe is in a huge jog right now as we fall into tyranny. There's so many reasons for these children being stolen. One is, of course, they want to be able to implant what they want in our children's head, to use them as their slaves. As they grow older, they will follow suit, and other ones will be used in the child sex rings. There are many government-sponsored pedophile rings all over the world, and I know people don't want to believe that, but you can look that up. All the money and everything gets linked to them. Follow the money and follow the sources, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of it links into many of our elite, and you've got to remember the elite, which are under control of the Zionist Rothschild regimes, which really own our governments, our corporations of governments, they're involved in a lot of pedophilia themselves. It deals with energy, absorbing energy from these children, and specific children, especially kids with blonde hair, blue eyes. They absorb a lot of energy by having sex with them in many different ways, specifically through the base chakra of that child. So we need to wake up to what's going on in this country and stop allowing it. Use your Second Amendment. Protect your child if anyone, I don't care if it's a government source or a stranger, tries to steal your children. I love you guys. Take care. Stay informed. Peace.